Thank you for joining me this afternoon as we talk about the upcoming Convening General Conference of the Global Methodist Church. It's a very exciting time in the life of the Global Methodist Church, as would be figured from it being a convening conference. And knowing that the people who are in this room may be at many different places in interacting with what's going to be going on at the Convening General Conference. I'm going to make some general remarks, but what I really want to do is make time for you to ask the questions that you would like to have answered rather than you're having to listen to me tell you what you ought to know. I'm willing to do that, but I think it would be much more beneficial to you if I gave you the opportunity to ask specific questions. So we'll do that. This is what, about 45 minutes? Okay, so we have until 2:30. So I'm sure you all are aware, I'm the Transitional Connectional Officer, and the Transitional Book of Discipline says that means I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Methodist Church. That was necessary because we came out of nothingness. God created us out of chaos, and I really believe that. And we had no leadership. We had no bishops that were part of the team at that point. We were moving from idea to something concrete. And everything we have done has been preceded by the word transitional or provisional. What we've been trying to communicate to people is that we are in formation, and I've often said to people that we were dealing with a chicken and egg problem. The chicken and egg problem was people wanted to know with some specificity what they were becoming part of, but at the same time, they wanted to be intimately involved in making the decisions that would determine what they were part of. And so how do you do that? Well, the way we did it was to pull together a group of leaders that were respected across the church, clergy and laity, and propose a transitional structure that folks had an opportunity to become part of that would govern us until we had a convening general conference at which delegates will adopt, in a formal sense, those things which have been transitional or provisional. I like to say to people, as of this past Monday, we have 4,501 churches that are members of the Global Methodist Church. We have 4,501 churches. Okay? We have 4,950 clergy persons who are members of the Global Methodist Church. We add churches every Monday. Last week, I think it was last week, we added 172 churches from the Democratic Republic of Congo, bringing that number in that part of the world to 364 churches from the Democratic Republic of Congo. This week, we have about 20 churches from Kenya that will become part. They're joining 40 other churches that had already come in. So what I like to tell people is every church and every clergy person who has become a member of the Global Methodist Church has voted for the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline, because they have to sign a document that says we affirm, will adhere to, and will be held accountable to the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline. So when people say, well, you don't really exist yet, I say we've had 4,501 churches vote to be part of the Global Methodist Church. We launched on May the 1st of 2022. So we're not even 2 years old yet, and yet we will have our convening general conference September 20th through 26th in San Jose, Costa Rica. So just over 2 years after we began operations, we'll be having our Convening General Conference. That is miraculous. And it was not my idea. I argued that was too soon, that we needed more time. And the people who work with me in the Transitional Leadership Council have come to say, you were right, that's too soon for us to do it, but we're doing it. The General Conference of the United Methodist Church is planned 8 years in advance. We had less than a year to pull this together. One of the questions that I'm asked that you might be interested in is, why Costa Rica? Well, we felt that if we could be at a location outside the United States, it would be an important message to our global constituency that we were not going to be a U.S.-centric and dominated church. Now, Costa Rica provided us with lots of advantages, including the fact that it is much easier for people outside the United States to get visas to Costa Rica than it is for them to come to the United States. We want to highly value the members of our church wherever they're located, and we don't want any of the games that have been played with the United Methodist Church that have prevented significant numbers of delegates from outside the U.S. from being present at their general conference. Additionally, the Evangelical Methodist Church of Costa Rica invited us to come and hold our conference there. The church in the global south, especially in South America, feels especially estranged from Methodism generally. They were essentially cast off by the United Methodist Church some years ago, and they consider it to be a high honor that we would come and do our general conference there. And they are significantly invested in this, helping us with all kinds of volunteer resources. They went and met with the president of Costa Rica to ensure that every bureaucratic obstacle would be removed for our delegates. We're just getting tremendous cooperation. Now, the disadvantage is it's not in your backyard. It's not close to us. We're not going to be able to accommodate every person who would like to be present for the Convening General Conference because of space limitations. I mean, there'll be 1,500 people there, and we will have 375 or so delegates. So there'll be lots of people that are present that are not delegates, but I can tell you there are many more people that want to be there than we can probably accommodate. It will be live streamed, and we're trying to create opportunities so that people can come and have the opportunity to at least be part of what goes on. So, during the General Conference, there'll be opportunities for people to volunteer. There are many different volunteer roles, and within the next couple of weeks, there'll be a form that will go up on our website. The website for the General Conference is sotheworldwillknow.org. sotheworldwillknow.org, all together. And so you can log in, you can go there, you can enter your name and contact information. You'll be put on a mailing list that sends out announcements, but the volunteer sign-up sheet will be there for people to sign up to be pages and to be marshals and to be hospitality and all the different roles we have. And those people, of course, will have an opportunity to be in the plenary sessions. There'll be some large worship events. One will be held at the Christian High School in San Jose, Costa Rica. And that accommodates, I believe, about 3,000 people. And then another one will be held at the large sports coliseum, I guess you would say, where they play indoor soccer and things like that, and that accommodates 5,000 people. We're using both of those events as evangelistic outreaches to the neighborhoods in which they're in. And so the Costa Rican church is going to be doing door-to-door evangelism leading up to those moments. And there'll be opportunities for us to present the gospel and to call people to respond to the gospel, which I am very excited about. But those will be open to anybody to come. We hope we'll fill up those places, but there's not going to be a limitation as we have at the convention center. The other thing that we're doing is, and by the way, I thought this overcomplicated our job. We're offering opportunity for people to come and be part of mission projects around Costa Rica during the time that we're doing the General Conference. So you can come and be part of a mission project that will be a day in length, each of them. You'll work with members of the Costa Rican Methodist Church in going out to communities and taking care of projects and opportunities to share the gospel. We're also offering a focused time of training in evangelism that will be at the Seminary there in Costa Rica. And so people can come and do those things and have an opportunity to rotate in to the plenary sessions at a different point in the week. So that gives us the opportunity to give lots of people exposure to what's happening. So that's some of the logistics. What we'll be doing is a registration link will go live on the website probably, I hope, in the next week or so, where delegates will be able to register and then volunteers will be able to register. I'll get you a question here in just a sec, John. Here's an interesting thing that probably wasn't something you'd expect you'd learn at this point. We reserved a block of hotel rooms. We have lots of hotel rooms, but we discovered that the flights departing Costa Rica leave mostly in the morning, which means on the 26th, the last day of the conference, we have to provide for people to stay over the night of the 26th and depart on the 27th. Nobody on the commission realized that until last week. So we're scrambling to get extra night of rooms in all the blocks, and that's what's holding up our registration process. John, what was your question? No. Thank you. The service projects, the mission projects, the evangelism class are primarily for those who will be guests of the conference, not those who are delegates. The delegates will be primarily involved in legislative committees and then plenary sessions, and so they won't have an opportunity to participate in those projects. The conference begins on the 20th and ends on the 26th, so we have essentially, I guess that's 7 days, which is less than what the United Methodist Church's General Conference has historically been. So it's a shortened time. The other thing that I'll mention before I open up questions generally is, well, first, the theme, I've already mentioned it, the theme of our conference is So the World Will Know. And we can put lots of taglines on that, but obviously the major focus is so the world will know Jesus Christ. So the world will know that there's a Savior that has come to save us from our brokenness and sin. So the world will know that there is salvation in the name of Jesus. So it will be a very evangelistically focused conference, underscoring the whole orientation of the Global Methodist Church, of helping people come to know Jesus and be discipled in their relationship with Jesus so that they grow in holiness, grow in character to be more like Jesus. As I mentioned, there will be approximately 370 delegates. The first allocation of delegates has already occurred on March the 1st. There'll be a second allocation of delegates on or about June the 15th. Why 2 allocations of delegates? Because we are still very much being changed as a church with new areas coming in. In the last 2 weeks, we have received approval from the governments of Tanzania, the Central African Republic, and Panama to be registered as a religious organization in those countries. We already have clergy and churches that are waiting to join the Global Methodist Church from those countries, and they will now be allocated delegates. So we've held back some delegates so that we are able to meet the representation needs of these new areas. Yes, sir.
As of today,
let's do the mic. We're recording it because boards and different delegations have asked.
as of today, do you have a number of countries that the GM is in?
Oh, what I can tell you is that we have annual conferences operating in 20 areas in the United States. So every part of the United States is covered by annual conferences. And we have 7 annual conferences operating outside the United States. That would include Slovakia, Bulgaria, Spain, Kenya, Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Spain, the Covenant Philippines, and Mega Manila provisional annual conferences. And then, as I just mentioned, we have Tanzania, Central African Republic, and Panama. Thank you. That just came on Friday. So and then there's a whole bunch of other ones that we're working on. So there'll be about 100 alternate delegates. The delegates are distributed on 2 bases: the number of churches that an area has that are part of the Global Methodist Church, and then the number of pastoral appointments or assignments. So 1/3 of the formula is the number of churches, 2/3 of the formula is based upon the number of pastoral assignments. The argument for that second part is it reflects the size of churches, because a larger church with larger membership would have more than one pastoral appointment or assignment to them. And we published an article that described how that was allocated. The Transitional Leadership Council has the option of altering that delegate formula or the allocation based upon late arriving regions. So there is an area, some of you will figure this out with me not saying who it is, and I'm not going to say who it is. There's an area in Africa where there are 4 annual conferences in an Episcopal area, and there's a very high probability that that entire Episcopal area will move into the Global Methodist Church, and they have over 1,000 churches there. So we will make provision, if they do, for them to be able to come in. The Convening General Conference will have a limited agenda. Now, that might surprise you, but the limited agenda is for us to do that which is absolutely essential to stand up and continue the operation of the church. We will have another general conference 2 years from now in 2026, which will not have a limited agenda. And by that time, we expect more parts of the global church to be part of us, thus better representation, and they'll have an opportunity to address not only what had occurred in 2024, potentially subject to amendment at any general conference, but also the areas that were not on the limited agenda. The limited agenda will enable the delegates to focus on the most important things that have to be resolved. The constitution of the church. We don't have a constitution right now. We're operating under the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline. But the Constitution, of course, provides the framework for the church, which is then very difficult to change because it requires a 2/3 vote to amend the Constitution. So it protects certain things that are part of the church. We will be taking up the nature and process of the episcopacy. The Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline does not address the episcopacy for the church going forward. And just to touch on this briefly, the Transitional Leadership Council is actually proposing essentially a 2-step process for us to onboard the bishops of the church. We, of course, have 2 active bishops right now, Scott Jones and Mark Webb. They will be proposed to be elected by acclamation at the beginning of the conference, and then we will elect a limited number of bishops for a 2-year term so that they will essentially serve from 2024 till we convene again in 2026. We're doing this because, of course, this General Conference has to vote on all the episcopacy legislation. And so we felt that it would be difficult to adopt that legislation and elect bishops and do everything else that had to be done at the convening General Conference. Again, there's an article, if you go to our website, that tells you all about the Episcopal legislation. The third thing that we will do is adopt legislation relating to the connectional organization of the church, particularly at the General Conference level. And if you followed this for a while, you know that we're committed to a lean structure without lots of boards and agencies and denominational staff. So there will be a number of connectional commissions that will be created, but they will be, the members of those commissions will be laity and clergy who are serving elsewhere in the church, who maybe are members of local churches or pastors serving local churches, and they won't be compensated for serving on these connectional commissions. There will be a small general church staff that will provide staff support for these connectional commissions, but the goal of the general church is to enable ministry at the local church level. So that will be worked out in many ways, but all of that connectional organization will be there. Those are probably the 3 most important things that will have to be done legislatively. There'll be probably some legislation related to ordination that will come before the body. There will probably be some legislation on the local church, some tweaks that will occur there, but that's will be the major legislative emphases. Legislation is initiated by the filing of petitions, and petitions can be filed right now. You go to the website I mentioned, and you click on petition submission, and you're taken to an online form where you can file your petition. Transitional Leadership Council annual conferences have the ability to file, they have the ability to file petitions. An individual can file a petition, but it has to be signed by 10 other professing members. So you have to list those 10 names. And there's some requirements that are spelled out on that page that you have to meet in filing a petition. So literally, any member of the church can file a petition, and we've had at least one petition filed in that way so far. The deadline for filing petitions is May the 23rd. The other thing we have to do, in addition to electing this fairly limited number of two-year bishops, and they'll be called bishops like anyone. I mean, we refer to them as interim bishops in the legislation, but they'll be consecrated as bishops. In addition to doing that, we need to elect leadership for the entire church. So all of the various commissions and all have to be elected. And what that means is every annual conference will have the ability to submit nominations of laity and clergy to be considered to serve on these various connectional commissions. It's my recollection that those nominations have to be submitted 60 days before the General Conference convenes. So that would be July, probably July 20th or so, that those nominations will need to be submitted. And whether you're a delegate or not, we need your input on that. We need folks to raise up people that you would support to be serving in the connectional commissions, the Connectional Court of Appeals, the Connectional Council, which will replace the Transitional Leadership Council, all of that. So there'll be more information that will be put out on that process, but that's something you'd want to be aware of. So we have about 15 minutes before you're supposed to move on to the next thing. So let me open it up for some questions, and Matt is going to bring the microphone around. Okay?
Yeah, but I've got two questions.
That's fine.
First of all, can you give us a general outline of the schedule? I know you won't have specifics, but generally what will be happening when? Secondly, when can we expect to hear something about our travel arrangements?
Travel, okay. So the schedule broad outline is there'll be an opening day plenary session at which the vote that I was talking about on Bishop Jones and Bishop Webb will occur. The plan of organization will be adopted. We'll be adopting a covenant relationship resolution with the Costa Rican Methodist Church, some things like that. There'll be some opening messages delivered by Bishop Jones and Webb, and a worship experience and all of that. And then most likely on there may be some legislative committee meetings on that day, but then the legislative committees will start meeting on day 2 and day 3, maybe part of day 4. And then beginning day 4, 5, 6, there will be plenary sessions. The worship experiences that I was talking about are in the evening. I believe it's on the 2nd day and the 5th day. And then on the 7th day, there will be a consecration service for the person's elected bishop. So generally, broadly, that's the schedule. Again, that's now one of the difficult things in agreeing on the agenda was whether we were going to conduct full-blown elections of bishops. The Episcopal legislation proposes that bishops will be elected for a 6-year term beginning in 26, and then they will have to stand for election for a second 6-year term. And again, I don't know how many bishops even then will elect, but it will be more than would be elected in 2024. So if we were going to have to elect all the bishops in 2024, that was going to greatly complicate the agenda. Now that we know that we're not doing that, the agenda is starting to come into focus, and we'll publish it as soon as we can. The travel arrangements are tied to the registration page, and us getting this resolved about the one extra night for the block of rooms, which should resolve this week, will remove the last impediment. We've got an agreement with Uniglobe Travel Agency to handle all of the airline reservations for the conference and to And you'll make your hotel reservations right through that block as well, through that registration form. So, oh, I hope so. I mean, I wanted it done a month ago, but anyway, I'm not in control of that. Yeah, hopefully by the end of the month.
So the Legislative Assembly, when I was looking at the plan of organization and what we were told in the delegation meeting, are we gonna start some of the legislative committees on Zoom prior to, and then assuming what I hear, you will meet in person?
Right. So one of the innovations that we have approved is that there's 7 legislative committees, and those legislative committees will have the opportunity to meet before the convening of the General Conference virtually by Zoom. They will be able to do some preliminary work there that will have to be voted on once they arrive in person in Costa Rica. The other thing is that we're dealing with there is delegations being elected at different times. We have asked that all delegations be elected by their annual conferences by June the 15th. But we're already aware of 2 annual conferences that will elect their delegates after June the 15th. And if we have some additional annual conferences formed, they may be even later. So the legislative committees may not be fully staffed, but we want them to go ahead and be able to begin doing some work to familiarize themselves with the legislation and even maybe make some preliminary determinations on how they would want to proceed. Who has a question? One over here. Okay. I thought I saw a hand go up.
Bishop Jones yesterday talked about making those decisions about how we're going to structure with the episcopacy and the way we're structured right now with the 2 bishops, and then we have the president pro tems over each annual conference. So the decision about how we actually structure that, will that wait until 2026?
No. And of course, that was part of the dilemma. If we're making those decisions at 2024, how do people then know what they're standing for election for and all? So we're making those decisions in 2024. We will adopt a plan for the episcopacy that will then begin to be implemented immediately, but the full cadre of bishops won't be elected until 2026. So,
but I guess my question is, will we be deciding at this general conference whether we limit that, it will, like in the U.S., to 2 bishops?
You will be deciding on the methodology that will determine that. So, a part of the Episcopal legislation is that there will be a general committee on the episcopacy that is made up of laity and clergy. And that general committee on episcopacy will be elected at the 2024 General Conference. It is that general committee on episcopacy that decides how many Episcopal areas there will be and who the initial slate of persons are nominated for the office of bishop to be voted on at the 2026 General Conference. Then others can be nominated from the floor. In 2024, the Transitional Leadership Council will determine the number of 2-year bishops that we will elect. And then they will receive nominations, and they will put a nominated slate of 1.5 times the number of persons that they've decided we need to elect bishops before the 2024 conference to vote on. Okay, and there can then be nominations from the floor. That's all spelled out. There's a high standard to be nominated from the floor. So you have to get 2/3 of the nominating ballot to get nominated from the floor. But the structure we will no longer have presidents pro tem if the structure's approved. We will have conference superintendents that would be the equivalent to a president pro tem. And then, of course, we will have presiding elders that are under the conference superintendent. The expectation, or what's been talked about, is we will probably elect a bishop to relate to 4 or 5 annual conferences. Okay, so the bishop would relate to 4 or 5 conference superintendents. So we have 20 conferences here in the U.S., so that would mean we would either elect 4 or 5 persons to be 2-year bishops for those 20 conferences. Those individuals who are elected will be assigned conferences by the General Committee on Episcopacy that's elected in 2024. So, and then of course, I mean, there's no, we have 7 conferences outside the United States. I mean, we're not electing bishops by geography, so, but obviously geography and language and all of that will enter into the deliberations on the assignment of bishops to annual conferences. So, other questions? Okay, good. Okay.
Thanks. If between now and 26, some whole annual conference or equivalent from a foreign country come in and they have a bishop,
Right.
would those bishops retain that sort of title within the GMC?
The Episcopal legislation addresses that possibility, and there's a process that, as part of that conference or conferences coming in, whether or not their bishop becomes a bishop of the Global Methodist Church is addressed as part of that receiving process. But they would only, if they come in 2024, 2025, they would also only serve until 2026. They could stand for election in 2026 for a 6-year term. But nobody is guaranteed continuation, including Bishop Jones and Webb. They're given some preference because they're currently bishops, and so we're recommending they be elected this time by acclamation, and they will be permitted to stand for election 2 years from now, but they're not given any preference in that election.
Hi, Keith. Bob Phillips here.
Yeah.
2 brief questions. Number 1, what is the best guess of the numerical membership of the Global Methodist Church as of today?
The numerical.
Numerical. And the second question is, there's another organization having a meeting in another part of the country. And word on the street is one of the things that may happen is eliminating language about celibacy and singleness and fidelity
Right.
in marriage and all that. How do you see or hope our general conference addresses these kinds of issues without getting drawn into the weeds or into simply a reactive perceived mode
Right.
with matters of this sort?
Thank you. So with respect to the first question, the numerical membership, I have no idea. I know that there are 4,501 churches, and I know that they vary in size from 10 or 15 members to 4,000, okay? So we have not collected that kind of data yet. And I know that is frustrating, especially to the secular media, because they're all about those kinds of numbers. We don't feel any obligation to gather that for them. And by the way, I mean, this is probably one of the more controversial things. The TLC adopted a motion, then we were asked to reconsider it. It went back to other groups to advise. It came back to the TLC. The way the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline was written originally was delegates were to be allocated based upon membership. We didn't have membership. So I knew the certain thing was number of churches. So the TLC adopted it'll be allocated on the number of churches. Then people got upset that we weren't accounting for the varying size of churches, and that's how we ended up on the formula. Membership is not a very accurate indicator of the vitality of our church. As most of us know, many membership rolls are inflated, and the number of attendees is less than membership. And then, of course, we have the variable of online membership now, and everybody counts online membership differently. So we've, at least at this point, stepped away from making membership a defining factor, but we haven't arrived on what would be its alternative. The approach in the Transitional Book of Doctrines and Discipline on issues of human sexuality is to state affirmatively what we are for, what we believe is the revealed will of God as stated in the Holy Scriptures. And so our social witness declares that marriage is between one man and one woman in a monogamous, covenantal relationship, and that sexual intimacy, sexual expression is only to occur within the boundaries of that covenant. That paragraph is not open under the limited agenda. It would take a 2/3 vote for the delegates to say we want to do something more than that there. Certainly there was the question yesterday here about whether we were going to begin to enumerate all the things that were not acceptable. And it has been the general determination we are going to preach what is God's blessing for his people, and what God does not bless, we will not condone. We will not. I mean, this is what we're for. If it's outside of that, it's not part of what we are blessing. So that's the approach that's been taken. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Who wants the last question?
And I'll be around till this is over. So, and you all know where to find me. Lots of people know how to email me and call me.
Did I see a hand over here? No? Okay.
Well, thank you. Please pray for the General Conference. I know you will. Pray for the leadership. I mean, the Commission on the Convening General Conference has done miraculous work. It's 22 people from all over the world. They meet every other week on Wednesday mornings. Their meetings now are lasting 3 hours in length because they have so much to do. They're meeting in task groups that handle various aspects. Putting on a general conference is incredible. I mean, do you realize everything that is printed has to be translated into 5 languages? Okay? That's a monumental task. And I've spent the last month negotiating contracts related to that. Then there is the interpretation of every word spoken. Now, we're going to be using artificial intelligence technology supported by human assistance in that. But so we're able to bring down those costs significantly. But pray for all of that to come together. Pray for the logistics of all these delegates and guests coming together. But most of all, pray that the Spirit of the living God will move and that the church that Jesus is building will be what emerges from this General Conference. Thank you so much for your investment in what God is doing through the Global Methodist Church.